Hello and good morning friends, welcome to CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, in this session today we are going to discuss on the topic, and this very topic is A View of Kabir. For this we have again with us in our studios Professor Anand Prakash. He has 40 years of experience, that is teaching experience, as well as he has authored books such as Literary Theory, as well as Indian Literature, as well as he edited journals in Hindi as well as English. So first of all, I would like to welcome our guest, Professor Anand Prakash. So welcome to the ADSEC lecture, and I hope all the students who might be watching us and would be watching later also would benefited from this very lecture. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Gitika, for your kind words, and welcome viewers to this discussion on Kabir, because rather than making large statements, I would be also considering and a few questions, and I would expect you also to respond whenever you feel like doing so. It's a topic that is after my heart, and who doesn't know Kabir in India? You know, the literates know Kabir, the illiterates know Kabir, and even the public school educated students also would have heard of Kabir sometime or the other in their life. If they didn't hear of Kabir in the classroom or during the reading of the course, they would have heard from their parents and grandparents about Kabir. He is such a figure, and when was he born? Where was he born? When did he die? These are the questions that come to us today, because then only, from our point of view, I call the lecture A View of Kabir. Only then can we really relate to Kabir from our time. Now the first question, when was he born? The answer is no one knows. Because Kabir didn't have biological parents to remember. He never saw them. Perhaps it was, and all that I'm going to tell you about his life is based on just a telltale account that people would have formed, in fact, after he died, when in the next century to the one when he lived, and so on and so forth. So Kabir, metaphor and symbol, this has been growing ever since people heard of and heard him, in the, I would say, largely the 15th and 16th centuries. Kabir had a long life. People who talk about Kabir say that he never died. And this is a kind of a conundrum that this is a person who didn't die, because nobody saw him die, nobody cremated him or buried him, and nobody noted the time or the day when he was born, because he was a foundling. He was found somewhere on the ghats of Ganga in Varanasi, lying and crying as a child of 1 day or 2 days. Some unwed mother would have left him, and then there was a couple who was passing by, and they heard the cries early in the morning as they came to have a bath in the Ganga, and when they saw that there was a child lying there, a small infant lying there, then they picked him up, and then the couple didn't have a child, and they didn't expect that they will ever have a child, but then this was a kind of God sent for them, and they took it as God's gift. So that's how Kabir comes into being, and has parents. Would he ever see the face of the school ever, the classroom, the books? Would he read books? No. In those days, education wasn't as easily available as it became available in the 20th century, and in the 15th, 16th centuries when he was, he lived. And even this is a guess, kind of, because in his poems, in his verses, there are references to Lodhis, but there is no reference to, for instance, Babur or Humayun or Akbar, which means that he is pre-Mughal. So one guesses, that he would be sometime in the 15th century or 16th century at the most. And Babur, sets foot on India in 1526, so he must have been before that time. So this is the guess, and there was no education, there was mass illiteracy, and people, might have gone to some pathshalas or madrasas, but only the ones, who who had some kind of privilege would go there. It wasn't easy to enter, these educational institutions run by, religious centers. So he never saw the face of a school. And in fact, what better way of knowing about Kabir than reading his verses? So I just start with the first line. I didn't quote the whole thing. Kabir is known for his dohas, his couplets, and some English translators translate even doha, the form doha, as an epigram. An epigram is something which contains a very concentrated statement, and which is very pithy, very precise, and you can easily remember because it's very striking. So one can call doha an epigram, but literally it's a couplet. It's a verse of 2 lines, and this verse does not get necessarily connected with the next doha. So you might have 10 dohas, you might have 20 dohas. In Kabir's case, you might have 100 dohas, and they don't connect with one another. They might be on the same theme, but that's the arrangement that people today give to his dohas. But he would not think of any theme in particular when he was writing a doha. And one of the lines in a doha is, "Masi kagad chhuyo nahi, kalam gayo nahi haath," which means he knows what is masi. Masi is ink, kagad is paper. He never touched paper and pen, paper and ink. He never touched. Now, which means that he knew that the ink existed and kagaz existed and that there was education. But so far as he was concerned, he never went near there. Kalam gayo nahi haath, I didn't hold a pen in my hand. So he doesn't know even how to hold a pen. He has never done it. And the second thing that comes to my mind, at least, is that this person is so very frank about himself. He is not ashamed of the lack of education. In fact, there is a suggestion here, and these suggestions, always come because one thinks of Kabir and then one knows what kind of person one is talking about. Education, of course, enlightens us. It gives us useful information. It makes us, employable. It gets us a job, and we become part of, the productive work that society has organized, in our midst. And therefore, education is an important activity. But education doesn't merely do that. Education is not merely skills. Education also is knowledge. Education is understanding. Education is wisdom. And what knowledge, what wisdom does education give? Now, if you go into the question, you realize that education gives that knowledge which which exists in life, and mostly it gives ideas about the knowledge, or knowledge are in the form of ideas, and the ideas of an age come from those who are privileged. Because it is they who control education. It is they who invest in their money and resources in education, and they would not like the people to know through education something critical of them. So therefore, the kind of privileged section that one has, their values will be given in education, isn't it? If that is the case, for instance, if the privileged ones are cruel, like there is caste hierarchy in India in the 15th, 16th centuries, if the privileged belong to the upper caste, then they will give those values which in a way support the upper castes, and which also means which also keeps the lower caste under check, and keep them insulting all the time. So this kind of value of accepting the caste system, in which the good ones are the upper caste ones and the bad ones are the lower caste ones, this kind of value one will imbibe also in the education institutions. So it's a boon, it's a blessing that Kabir didn't go to a school. Otherwise, he would have accepted the values of his time. And because he did not go to a school, and he did not touch ink, paper, or pen, therefore he might have remained pure in his life. I'm giving you a very far-fetched, interpretation of the line in the Doha. But I say, if one looks at his ideas, one looks at his responses, and considers them a bit seriously and critically, then one realizes that Kabir doesn't pay any respect to the existing value system. He is very critical of the value system, and one reason would be that he remained pure at heart because he never went to a school. Anyway, the second quotation that I give is from a famous early 20th century critic. It's a Hindi critic, and I just quote these 3 words. he says, Kabir bahushrut the, which means, of course, he didn't have education, but he heard a lot. So bahushrut means a person who had heard quite a great deal. And Kabir would keep his ears open and his eyes open, and he would see the phenomena called the world. He would see the theatre called the world. And from there he grasped the essence, the truth of the world in which he lived. So he is bahushrut, and there is a kind of education that one gets also from the ear, also from the eye. What you see, in fact, is supposed to be more true than what you hear or what is told to you. Therefore, Kabir got his education not from schools and colleges, there was no colleges, but from schools or madrasas. Kabir got his education from common life, whatever he saw, whatever he heard. Is it because of this that Kabir has a very poor view of the scholars? I asked this question, viewers, from you, and I asked this question from myself. He has a very poor view of, very poor opinion of the scholars, like me. For instance, I call myself some kind of a scholar. I've read books and I also write books, and if Kabir met me, then he would say, you don't know anything. And I would have to agree with him, because the kind of truth that he had seen, I as a scholar may not have seen. And just see what he says in this Doha, the next one that I'm quoting. He says, Pandit or Mashalchi, dono suje nahi. If you are a Pandit, if you are a scholar, or if you are a torch bearer is supposed to show you the way. The torch is burning, and you in the dark, and you go with the torch in front of the crowd, and the crowd follows you because you have the light, source of light with you, and the path is shown like this. So Pandit and Mashalti, says Kabir, belong to the same category. He is comparing a scholar with a torch bearer, and he says that both are unable to see anything. दोनों को कुछ नहीं सूझता है, दोनों को कुछ समझ नहीं आता है, दोनों को कुछ दिखता नहीं है, दोनों सूझे ना ही. Both of them are unable to see, even though the torch bearer has the light in his hand and the Pandit has the light of knowledge in his head, but then they don't understand. This is what Kabir says in this Doha, and then he has the punch line in the second part. He says, "Auran ko kar chandna." They show light to others. Pandit tells others the knowledge. The Mashalchi is telling others, okay, this is light, this is the path, let's go. Aap andhere mein hai. And they themselves have no light inside themselves. Now Kabir is launching a very scathing attack on these people who are supposed to be scholars, who are supposed to be showing us the way. And this he is able to say because he has seen a different version of truth. He has seen a different aspect, a different side of truth. And that truth goes completely at variance with, that goes completely against the kind of truth that is being told by the influential people in the society at that time. This is the kind of critical attitude that Kabir has. And viewers, you should know that there is a lot of truth in this. Even today, if you, from the 21st century angle, if you look at Kabir, then you would merely agree with him. You can't disagree with him, because when it comes to understanding society, then who understands the problems of society better? The common masses or the experts? You would have seen, elections happen every 5 years in India, and because of certain, reasons, happen every year, sometimes twice a year also they happen. And all experts, predict some kind of a result. And finally, the masses, the common masses, always prove the Pandits and the scholars and the experts wrong. There are certain figures which are given, and then one realizes that the person who thought he or she would win loses, and the one who never thought of winning also wins, which means that the knowledge of society is not necessarily with those people who produce knowledge and who gain knowledge. It comes from elsewhere. Where it comes from, what knowledge is, are the questions that Kabir raises. He doesn't give very specific answers to these questions. I don't know any answers to these questions as to who gives knowledge actually. Where does knowledge come from? Because experts are wrong. Scholars are proved wrong. One scholar does not agree with another scholar. So which one is right? So these are the questions, and Kabir is raising these questions. And as I said, he never went to a school, and he is raising these basic questions. Then, Kabir would not be easily cowed down by the fact that he didn't read. he would not be feeling very depressed and sad that he doesn't enjoy the facilities of life. He may not have a proper properly covered and protected house. He may not be able to sleep properly. Maybe it's very cold or it's very hot, and then he doesn't have those facilities. But then when it comes to criticizing society, then it does not bother. He is not a deen dukhiya. He is not a person who is helpless and who is all the time feeling bad about himself. He is angry. Kabir is an angry person, and angry at that time, being angry at that time is really important. It's also very risky to be angry, in a time when there are rigid caste hierarchies, and when a person who is from nowhere and who belongs to the lower caste, this stands up and against he stands up against religious leaders, and he stands up against others. And I would say that in one respect he is a very strong social critic. I'll tell you about a play that is written on his life by the famous progressive 20th century writer Bhisham Sahni. I'll talk about that play after this particular couplet has been discussed. He says in this couplet, "Kankar pathar jod ke masjid lahi banaye." How do you make a masjid? How do you erect a masjid? You just put mortar and stones, pieces of stone or big rocks, etc. You put them together, and then a wall comes up, and that wall is a masjid. Is that of a masjid, of a mosque. Okay, that's fine. You can put these things together, and you can make a masjid. And then he says, the second line he says, then on that masjid, tachad mulla bangde. The mullah, the person, the priest, then goes up the mosque, stands on the top of it, and from there he calls out to people. Bang dena is calling out to people that now wake up. Now is the time for doing namaz and all those things. And then Kabir says, "Tachad mulla bang de, kya behra hua khuda hai? Is your God deaf? Has it gone deaf? That you have to shout from the top of the masjid, and you have to say this." So which means that the kind of Khuda that you are worshipping is not the Khuda who doesn't have ears. So, the real Khuda is that Khuda which hears your voice even though you don't speak anything. Because the God God, for instance, knows each and everything. If that is the case, then why go up and shout from there that God should hear you? Now this kind of a thing goes against religion in one sense, in the sense that institutionalized religion, whether it's Hindu religion or Muslim religion, institutionalized religion has this problem that the idea of God whom they believe in, that idea is a bit against what the facts are, and consistently one can say that God knows everything, God is all powerful, God is omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, etc. If that is the case, if God is omnipresent, if God is present everywhere, then why specific places for him? Somebody who is rational, somebody who is logical can ask this question, and it's very difficult for people of the institutionalized religion to answer this. And Kabir is raising it at that time when there was so much of religious intolerance, much more religious intolerance than it might be even today. But Kabir had the guts, to come out in the open and would say this. Now, that's why Kabir is a very inspiring figure in our own time, and people keep writing about Kabir, discussing Kabir, writing plays about Kabir. And I saw one such play by Bhisham Sahni, and the play was called, the title of the play was Kabira Khada Bazaar Mein. And there, the young man who was acting Kabir, because this angry Kabir is the young Kabir. This is not the mature Kabir. This is how Kabir starts his career as a saint. And he is so angry. And in that particular play, he was shown as so angry by Bhisham Sahni that, Kabir goes out in the morning and he takes a bath and, he puts on clothes, and then he goes out. When he comes back, he is all over bandaged. All over bandaged. People have beaten him up. And they have beaten him up so much that he can't even walk properly. And then his mother, the woman who was looking after him, then he asks him, "Why do you go like this? And why do you talk so frankly to people?" And he said, "This is my job. I must tell people what the truth is." He said, but nobody wants to know your truth. They might hurt you, they might even kill you. And he says, let them kill me. I don't bother, but I would tell them only that which I think is right. So every day in the morning he goes in a proper way, and when he comes back he is bandaged. That's how Bhishma Swami visualizes a young man who is angry, who is not violent, who believes in peace, who wants to spread knowledge, etc., and true knowledge, God's knowledge, but then he comes back. People don't want to understand his kind of knowledge. So who is at fault? The person who goes out and tells people that they are wrong, or the people who think that he is hurting their sentiments and therefore they will beat him up every day? This is the question I raise, and I don't answer this because all of us have to find our own answers to such questions. Then in the second one, he talks about the Hindus. First he talked about the Muslims, and then he talks about the Hindus. And there we say, because Muslims don't do that kind of idol worship, but Hindus do. And this is another doha. Jap tap puja archa jyotig jag borana. The word jyotig is slightly difficult. I think it's to do something with jyoti. That is, you burn some diyas or some earthen lamp. Maybe that's the meaning. But the rest is quite simple. You do jap, you do your chanting, you do tap, you do some kind of worship. Puja is worship, archana is worship. All these are words connected with different phases of the puja or worshipping. And then you have jyoti jagana also. Jyoti jag, or jag is the other meaning also. Jag means the dunya. And finally he says, through these practices of worship, actually the world has gone mad. They are mad when they are performing pujas like this through jap and tap. Kabir is saying it very clearly. And then kagad likh jagat bhulana. You keep writing. You are people who are well versed in things, and you can write. And then you are writing. Maybe I think he's talking about me. I write quite a lot. But then in the course of writing, if I forget about the world in which I live, jagat bhulana, man hi manna samana. And I think that this has two meanings. One meaning is that you are full of pride when you are writing books, etc. But then the other meaning also would be that you forget about the world and don't consider the world inside your mind, inside you. So both meanings are there. And Kabir is once again expressing his anger in these lines, and the anger is expressed in very clear and frank terms, so much so that people will not consider him to be acceptable, and they will feel hurt that he is talking about truth in such matters. But then if one doesn't talk about truth in such matters, then how does one set the world thinking about the follies that it commits? I will be quoting one or two more, and then I'll discuss in the second part of this lecture something that can be generally considered and analyzed with respect to Kabir. This other couplet it goes like this, and this I think is one of the finest humanist statements that a poet of the medieval times can make. Humanist statement, I say. That is, you don't bother about which religion one belongs to, which sect one belongs to, and that all human beings are equal, all human beings are the same, and that there's no difference at all so far as their existence in life is concerned. He says, Ek boond, ek mal mutar, ek cham, ek buddha. All of us are made of the same stuff. All human beings are made of the same stuff, of the same matter. There's no difference between one human being and another. It is just ek boond. Ek boond means, when the child is conceived by the mother and the father, then it's just a drop. And that drop, turns into a kind of ovum and sperm, and then, the child is in the embryonic form, and it's the same kind of a boond everywhere. It is one way that a human being is conceived. Then ek mal, so whatever mal is there, whatever dirt is there, it's the same. In all the bodies, if there is mal, that mal is equal to the mull elsewhere. Ek mutar, the urine is the same. Ek cham, the skin is the same. Ek guda is pulp, but guda here would be perhaps the fat or the muscle or whatever inside the skin, that, which means all these things in all human beings are the same. That human beings biologically, physically are constituted of the same matter. Ek jati te sab upja. Jati also is one. Jati means here species. The human species is jati. So ek jati te sab upja. All of us belong to the same species. All of us are human beings. And then he says, kaun Brahman, kaun Sudha. Then whom would you call a Brahman and whom would you call a Shudra? Nobody is a Shudra, nobody is a Brahman. So he is going hammer and tongs at the caste system, and he is going to the basics. And he is able to then tell people that if they distinguish between one person and another, it is their fault. Nature did not make human beings this way or that way. Now, I raised one specific question here, and then I go to the other ideas. I will not, I think I will take one more example, because that is a very violent example, and saints can also be obscene. They can talk dirty stuff, they can talk about sex and pornography, they don't bother about it. Saints are that, they're very frank, and it's their frankness that gives them what is called strength of character. For instance, he is really so angry with the Brahmins and the Muslims. In two lines, he has castigated both Hindus and Muslims. In the first line, he says about Brahmins, and he's talking. The other thing that he's saying in the next one is that he seems to be standing in front of an audience. There are people in front of him, or there is a person in front of him, and he's talking to him. And how does he talk? Jo tu. You see, imagine somebody standing before him and he's addressing him. Jo tu Brahman Brahmani Jaya. If you are born of a Brahman and a Brahmani, a man and a woman belonging to the Brahman caste. If your mother is a Brahmani, if your father is a Brahmin, and they produced you, they gave you birth. If that is the case, तो आन बाप से क्यों नहीं आया? You all came through the specific part of the body of the woman. Then you could have, you are a Brahmin, you belong to the upper caste, and you are a special person. In that case, you should have been born in some other way, some specific way. But why were you born the same way? He's asking a question, and like a saint, Kabir can ask these questions. Of course, it's not parliamentary perhaps to talk about these things, but Kabir doesn't bother about the parliamentary kind of a thing. He does always call a spade a spade. So a spade is a spade, it's nothing else. So why not call words by their proper names? And he says, if you are a Brahmin and you belong to a superior caste, then your way of being born also should be different. But no, you are born like the lower caste. So in that case, how are you from the upper caste? And then he comes heavily on the Muslims. Jo tu turak turakani jaya. If you are born of the parents who are Turks or Muslims, तो भीतर खतना क्यों नहीं कराया? Now what is khatna? Now khatna actually is the identity mark of a Muslim male, not of a female. Muslim males, have this surgery done on their phallus, on their sexual organ, and it is that which defines them as Muslims. That is called khatna. In English, this is called circumcision. But then he says, actually you make a Muslim outside the body of the woman. If you are a Muslim born, then you should have been born inside. You should have been circumcised inside. But that's not the case. Which means that it is human beings themselves who create out of themselves either Muslims or Hindus. And this is once again, along with the previous couplet, this makes a very sharp statement on the division which is based on religion or based on caste. And if this person is so very angry with caste system and with religious divisions in society, then you can imagine how much this person is relevant even today, when then different kinds of riots, and the world is full of all the conflicts at the social level. People kill one another in the name of religion, in the name of caste, in other names also, And the world over, there's a kind of a fight between Christians and Muslims, Christians and Hindus. There's a fight between Christians and Jews, and the world has become very violent. And I'm talking about the 21st century. If that kind of violence is there today, then which means that Kabir talking about it actually is anticipating all that is happening today. So he has that kind of a vision. Now, one general question I would like to raise. Viewers, I hope that you have all understood what I have said, and particularly with respect to the, I'm assuming that you all would have understood the poems that I have quoted from Kabir. And these poems, now I will ask the question from you, and I ask this question from myself also. Which is this language he is talking about? He is talking in, talking through. That language, well, is the language of the masses. He doesn't know Sanskrit. He doesn't know any language which civilized people in their normal parlance speak. He's talking as if the language of the street. This is how people talk on the street. And if he's talking in the language of the street, are his ideas simple? I don't think his ideas are simple. His ideas are very complex, because he is raising questions about religion. And in religion, he knows quite a bit about the divisions, the behavior of the people who believe in one religion or another. He has observed their gestures. He has seen their arguments, and he is meeting them at the argument level. And all this he is doing in the language of the common masses, not the language of books. So how come that an illiterate person is able to formulate and articulate such difficult views that even today, we are shocked when we hear that this is the case. He is able to articulate such views, so successfully in a language. Now, my question to you is, how is it that a writer can express difficult ideas in simple language? Mostly difficult ideas are expressed in difficult language. And the Pandits know, and they generally quote shlokas in Sanskrit, and then they explain to us, and then they feel satisfied that we have now understood. But this man talks of very complex truths in a language that common people speak, which means that he is a true poet. And true poetry always remains close to the ground, and true poetry is always wedded to truth, and is wedded to reality. And if he is driven by the demands of reality, then of course, out of anger, out of concern, or out of deep interest, he can create a language of his own. And he has created. And in fact, in India particularly, Kabir is one of the most quoted poets. So you go to any village, and somebody will say something about happening, and that will be a quotation from Kabir. Like these ones. Kagar Pathar Jod ke. This is so very popular in the villages that people, whenever they want to laugh at a particular person who belongs to this or that religion, then they start using such a language. So imagine that the poet is using this language just to communicate to the masses, and that is one of the purposes of writing literature. Now, is there something that Geetika would like to ask? Geetika,
so, my question is, as you said, that he opposed the basically the value system, but in some other sense, if I would say that he's contributing to the value system, if we say that as you say, that he opposed the caste system, that is what is Hindu, what is a Muslim, they are a human being first of all. So in some way he discarded this value system, but in the other way he given something to the value system only.
This is very good. I couldn't agree with you more. This is really the case that this person is not out to destroy peace and harmony in society. In fact, he is working for a greater harmony and a greater peace, because there is no harmony in society if the society is caste divided along caste lines or along religious lines. Then it's not a peaceful situation. So in fact, Kabir is giving an alternative paradigm, an alternative point of view. And that point of view is superior to the one that exists at the time. So in fact, he is for harmony, he is for peace. So if all of us start treating one another on equal terms, and not through the prism of prejudice, whether one is a Muslim or a Hindu or a Christian, etc., then this world can always remain peaceful. So you are right that he is actually giving a different set of values, and those values are more humanistic and more acceptable. And it is this, which makes us read Kabir even after 500 or 600 years of his death. So that's the case, and I think it's a good point you have made. And do you feel shocked or angry when you hear Kabir's verses?
Yes, sir, shocked in the sense that it is the lingo which Kabir basically used. If we talk about the common man or the layman using such terminologies or the lingo, they used to describe the person, oh, you don't know how to talk or how to speak. But in some sense, if we go through these couplets, it is giving out something. And because it is giving out something, it is giving a sense, yes, we sometimes don't tend to think about the things. That is what I could say.
There is something which is called complacency. I'm only responding, I'm not answering the question. I'm just responding to what you have said. That most of us are so much asleep at the level of ideas that somebody has to shake us out of complacency and has to wake us up. So Kabir is using these harsh words in order to give a jolt to the people. This is called shock therapy. So he's giving a kind of shock therapy by bringing in these words that whether God has gone deaf, etc., etc. So if one doesn't use these words, then people will not accept, because they have been all the time living with these ideas, and they have called them right, and now they can't easily call them wrong. But then somebody has to come and give them a good shake up and then say, please wake up and start considering what you have been accepting otherwise. So I think that the shock therapy is needed, and in fact this shock therapy is used by even some of the contemporary writers, and sometimes the government or the society takes action against them, but then to be a writer is to be an honest person, and if honesty is punished, then actually honesty is not being punished, we are punishing ourselves, because we are in a way attacking honesty, and if we attack honesty, very soon we will be dehumanized. If Kabir is discarded, if Kabir is rejected, then in fact we are rejecting the health of society, because this person is mentally healthy. He wants to tell us that all of us are equal, that we should remain just, and this language in fact is the language of great value, as you rightly pointed out. Now, viewers, on the basis of what I have quoted and explained to you, I will be making some general points. If in fact Kabir's poetry cannot be covered in one lecture to anybody's satisfaction, I might like to speak for 3 or 4 lectures, but at least one more lecture may be required, even in the present case, when other aspects of Kabir's poetry can be discussed. But then, on the basis of what I have said just now, I will be making a few points here of a general nature, and let's see how viewers you accept them, find yourself in agreement with them, or whatever. But then I would like to share these ideas with you. The first point I make is that Kabir is a people's poet, a voice of the most dynamic section of his times. So there are 2 parts here. First, I call him people's poet. He doesn't belong to experts, he doesn't belong to scholars, he doesn't belong to academics, he belongs to all the people together, and he is talking in a language that all people will understand. The scholars will understand, and the lowest of the low, the most illiterate person will understand, and not only understand, these people will enjoy, these people will respect him for the kind of views that he holds, and he can finally become a spokesperson of the people for this particular reason. So I don't know whether viewers you call him a people's poet or not, but I think he will carry some kind of a conviction with the North Indians, with the East India people from the Eastern India, from the Western India, and from the Southern India. In fact, there are myths about Kabir. I'm of course talking about these myths, using these myths to create a picture of Kabir in your mind. Since nothing is known about his life, therefore people have just started weaving stories about him, and on the basis of these stories we know something about Kabir. Now, such a biography which is based on imagined stories or heard stories, but not on facts, etc. This is not called biography. There is a new word that I am using. This is called hagiography. The word is a little uncommon, but hagiography means that on the basis of what you have heard, you build up a particular kind of an image of a person. And Kabir, if he is a people's poet, then what is meant is that he is popular in his own time all over India. Is that the case? One should find out. But then, if you believe in, moving from one place to another in festival time, like people go to Haridwar or to Kashi or to Banaras or to southern temples, etc., and they went on these journeys in the medieval India, taking 1 month or 2 months, and then they would come back and they would take part in fairs, village fairs or big fairs, melas as they are called today. Then there will be singing groups coming from different parts of the country, and these groups would sing songs. And Kabir was one of the most popular poets to be sung. In fact, he is so popular in the 20th century also that all the a large number of great singers, classical singers, have sung his songs, and these songs are remarkable, for the kind of experimentation that they have occasion, at the hands of the singers. So he's a people's poet in the sense that you may not be able to read him. You may not be able to buy books, that contain his poems, but you can go to a fair and you can hear him from the singing of others. So in a way, the message all over India is going through fairs and music to different parts of the country. And there, all people not only hear his poetry, but also sing his poetry themselves. In fact, Kabir was such a phenomenal, presence in India that people would write like Kabir, and they would hide their own name, and they would say at the end, "Kahe Kabir suno bhai sadhu," as if the poem was written by Kabir. So there are large number of poems written in the name of Kabir, which Kabir never composed. In fact, if you go around the place in the country even today, you will find there will be 10,000 or 20,000 or even more poems in the name of Kabir. All of them are not written by Kabir. Somebody who admired Kabir would have written those poems, and then he would have appended the name of Kabir at the end of the doha or a poem. This is one. And secondly, when this kind of a thing happens, then it is very difficult for a scholar today to identify the real poems of Kabir. Now tell me how to find out whether the poem that I am quoting is actually from Kabir or from somebody else who wrote in the style of Kabir. There is no way. And the other thing that I say about Kabir is that till the 20th century, there wasn't a very authentic text of Kabir. Only around the late 19th century or early 20th century did people start taking Kabir academically seriously. And then they went around collecting his pieces and identifying whether they were genuine or not. And one very important source of Kabir's poetry, and you will be surprised, pleasantly surprised, one of the important sources of Kabir's poetry is Guru Granth Sahib. The great Sikh Gurus, it is they who collected all the good poems in their own time. It must be the 16th century or so. And then they compiled the different poems in the Holy Granth. And these disciples of the gurus, great gurus, they would not bother about Kabir or Guru Nanak or Guru Gobind Singh or anybody. They would say, okay, these are great poems and let's accept them. So this kind of inspiration coming in a group of people shows that Kabir actually gelled with, actually combined well with different people who believed in truth, who believed in courageous writing. Who can be more courageous than the Sikh gurus? One knows that they would they would believe in something and then they would be prepared to die for that thing. So Kabir became Kabir was preserved in Guru Granth Sahib, and one of the finest sources of Kabir's poetry is Guru Granth Sahib. Then in the 19th century you have Rabindranath Tagore. He certainly started searching for Kabir's poetry, and he was so much enamored of Kabir. Now Geetika asked about the people who do not like harsh language. But then the answer could be given in the response of Tagore. Who could be more cultured than Tagore, who was born in a very high, caste family in Bengal, and he knew English, and he was taught by his, teachers who came to his home, and he went around the world, and his poetry and his fictional writing all has those great value that is there in language, etc. And this person was one of the finest admirers of Kabir. He was so he liked so much Kabir's poetry that he translated 100 songs of Kabir into English, and then they are available today in the printed form. So right from the highest people in the land to the lowest, people responded to him. So that makes him a people's poet, in my opinion. Then the second question that I raise under this point is whether he belongs to certain sections whose ideas or responses he is representing. I call him a voice of the most dynamic section of his times. Which is the dynamic section of whose voice he is? So you may try to identify, you may think of what the peasants taken up by his, was he representing the peasant's point of view? Was he representing the king's point of view, the prince's point of view? Was he representing the upper caste point of view, Brahmin's point of view? Was he representing the women's point of view? Which section I'm talking about? And my answer is that there was a new section in the medieval times which had come up, to take world at a different angle. This section was not there earlier. For instance, I consulted some history books to find out which were the progressive sections in the medieval period, and I found that there were sections in the medieval period which had adopted new professions, and these professions belonged to the lower castes, and they worked with hand, and they became artisans. So they would weave thread. They would make cloth. Then they will make experiments with colors, and they will dye the cloths, the cloth. So they will refine the art of spinning, and they will improve the thread, etc. And Kabir himself, by profession was a julaha, so he was a weaver. And if one was a weaver, and if one was dealing with these things, then one is all the time, producing something for the benefit of society. And this person, from that angle, that one is a weaver, that then upper caste people come, the lower caste people come, and he observes them. And he is not bothered about making cloth for this or that person. He is making cloth for everybody. His job is to help people cover their bodies with the cloth that he makes. So that way, it's a new class that has come up. It was not there in this kind of a form earlier. Now new researches were happening, with respect to color, how cotton can be ginning can be done, how it can be made more fluffy, how it can be moistened, or how it can be dried up to what extent, what temperature can be used, and all those things. This kind of a knowledge was spreading in the 15th and 16th centuries, and a new artisan class was coming up. And this class did not bother about who was working with them, whether it was a woman working with them, whether a Muslim was working with them, or a Hindu working with them. And maybe there were many poor people, poor Brahmins also, who would be starving. Some of them would come and join them also. So they would leave their caste inhibitions, and then the lower caste will accept them with open arms. So a kind of different humanity had come into being at that time, and Kabir must have looked at the world around him from this angle, and therefore he is in favor of humanity as one and indivisible. So I am only guessing, I am not sure whether this is true, but I feel that India was changing in the medieval period, and it is because of this that people like Kabir were thrown up, people like Kabir were produced, and they started looking at the whole world differently. And if the mullahs would come, or if the Brahmins would come, and they would say, okay, give us less money, we will not pay you enough, and etc., then julahas and others, they will say, what kind of people are they? On the one side they are worshipping God, on the other side they are fleecing us. So they had a wholesome hatred for these people who were telling lies, and who were fighting among themselves, and who were accepting bribes and all those things. So therefore, this group of people which was honest, the people who were honest, so they were looking at the from the angle of honesty at these people who were dishonest. So they might have been also full of anger. So I am suggesting that a new section of people had emerged in India at that point of time, and that this section could see the elements of distortion of behavior much better than others, and that's what produced perhaps the opinion of a Kabir. Now, because it's a kite flying, it's a kind of guesswork, and I would like Geetika to respond to whether, so in society this kind of thing happens.
Yes, sir.
Please tell your opinion.
My question, so your question is regarding the things prevalent in the society.
Yes.
So things prevalent in the society are, I feel so, are the man-made. As the Kabir, because if we talk about Kabir, that is, he explained the philosophies of life. Every man who lives tend to live for oneself, but Kabir, who lived for the entire humanity. You are right that this things prevalent in the society. I would only say that they are the man-made things. Because we are living in a state where every person thinks that my things are completed. I have a luxurious life, or nobody thinks about the humanity. So these are the things prevalent in the society, which are giving birth to the numerous of the problems in the society. We discard and to the problems, and we allegate some other person that he has given rise to these problems.
Yes.
But in some way or the other, it is we who have done so.
And also, secondly, you know that majority of the people at any point of time in history are honest people. It's only a small minority, you know, which goes by the values of dishonesty, etc., and which imposes that dishonest system on others. So Kabir belongs to that majority of people. He is a people's poet, and he has seen people slogging, working hard and living honestly, and he is very soft towards women at that point of time, which means that he must have seen women working, you know, assiduously, honestly about their job, and he is representing their point of view. And if you look at the world from their point of view, then you realize, you know, that the world is going to dogs, not because of the majority of the people who are the same, but those who are privileged, those who are powerful, those who can impose their will and wish on the rest of the humanity. So, but I thought you were asking a question yourself, were you?
So my question, as you said that he was a weaver and he used to work with lots of people, and he used to work for lots of people. His extrinsic character was somewhere was very close to his intrinsic character, or we can say that his extrinsic character transformed his intrinsic character. After knowing the world, knowing the people, knowing society, he was able to point out or bring out the issues which he laid in his poetry and the couplets. Do you feel so, sir?
This is a difficult question you are raising. How does one become a poet living in our normal life at that point of time? I can't. Nobody can answer, you know, for sure as to how a poet becomes a poet. But then, you know, one can always guess that, you know, when a person is angry, when a person is dissatisfied, you know, with the behavior of people, then there are some sensitive souls among them who sit back and then try to find out intellectually as to what is the reason. So maybe Kabir was one of those sensitive people. He had not seen the you know, affection of a real mother. He had not seen, you know, any of the luxuries. Of course, his parents were the other foster parents. They were really doting. They were loving him, but they might have finally died, and he may have married a person, a woman. There are stories about Louis. There is a woman called Louis whom he married, and they had children also. So these things, you know, all of them compel a person to think differently. Then, you know, you look at the world, you know, from a distant angle. So it's a complex issue how one becomes a poet. But definitely, your life outside always, you know, affects your life inside. This is quite true. For instance, if you are, I can give you one instance. There's a famous, you know, line from him. He says, "Chhini, jhini, jhini, bini, chadariya." There's a famous one there. So he's doing that chadariya himself. And when he's doing that chadariya, when he's making that particular, you know, cloth, then, you know, he knows that after some time this will become weak. This will have to be thrown away. And then he starts thinking of his own body. that yesterday he was powerful, today he is losing strength, tomorrow he will be old, and that his body is like that of chadar. So like chadar becomes weak, his body also will become weak. So once one can start thinking from ordinary details of life about the nature of life. So he could not have written this poem unless he was a weaver. So he took his symbols and his metaphors from day-to-day life. So a great poet is one who doesn't have to read books to write like others. A great poet looks at the phenomena of life. If he is making a chadar, then he will use chadar in his poetry also. So this way poets pick up important details from life and give them the shape of metaphors and symbols, similes. And this is how the poetry is written. And sometimes somebody comes and sings a song to him, so he, in answer to that, he'll give a song. So all these, basically, one has to live a life of social kind, interacting with the people, disagreeing with them, also agreeing with them, having a kind of a dialogue regularly, and taking a moral stand. And when you see, if you are criticizing a mullah or a Brahmin, then you must also say, what is your view of God? So you have to think about that view also. So Kabir has this, and the society at that point of time was vibrant, because this new class had come, and there would have been hundreds and thousands of people at that time doing these businesses. It's not merely the weaving; it's also the profession of rangrej. That is the person who is dying. So dyers would be there, and the weavers would go to the dyers and they would come back. So they would help each other also. So the ethos of helping, the ethos of cooperating, the ethos of sitting down together and gossiping, all this came together, and it was not a society where people would not talk to others. So that's why they would sing together. So these things, I think, really helped in making the poetry so very enriched at that point of time. So I end up by saying that Kabir is a critic of society, that is a people's poet, and that his poetry is really high class because it spreads very difficult ideas among ordinary masses. So with this I complete today's argument, and let's see what we do later regarding Kabir. Maybe we have one more discussion on Kabir.
Definitely, sir. We would be privileged to have more lectures on Kabir because it is very interesting. I learned more through you about Kabir, and hope in future also we would be able to get a deep knowledge on Kabir through you. Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much.
Thanks to you.